Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, the series where we look at mocks from the community and have a little bit of a chat about what they're doing and why it's so cool to hopefully inspire you to build some Bionicle mocks of your own. This episode is going to be on Plague Mechs. This was a requested theme and is kind of a more interesting theme. It's not sort of something we typically do, but I thought that it's very fitting and makes for a great theme. So you might be like, okay, what's a Plague Mech? Well, let me explain. So, Plague Mechs are a series of sort of insect, arachnid, anthropod sort of themed robots that were created in this war between two rival inventors, Hector and Artillerix. Now, this of course is all a thing made up by one AFOL named Jafer. He's a guy from the community I'm sure you've heard of in some of these episodes. And this is a little idea that he came up with, and as a result, a lot of really awesome Plague Mech mocks have been made, and it's a really cool concept. So, kind of going a little bit more into the lore of Plague Mechs, each Plague Mech has two names, one after a letter in the Greek alphabet, and the other after the creature that it is inspired by. So visually, all Plague Mechs are black, with a single opaque accent color, and minor accent colors from a transparent color. And this can normally be kind of limited to, say, like the eyes of the mock or something, or in some cases we'll see on this mock a few other little areas and stuff like that. However, Hector's Plague Mechs are sort of marked with a splash of gold, and this is kind of determine friend or foe, that sort of thing. So earlier in the year being 2018, Jafer held this contest over on Instagram where he challenged contestants to make their own Plague Mech, and they had to sort of pick a side between one of these two. And so, from the winners of this, which there were 8 winners, 4 of them were put into the canon of the Plague Mech universe, which is pretty awesome, isn't it? That was pretty cool. So awesome to kind of create this whole little universe here with all these awesome, really nicely designed little Plague Mech mocks and things like that. Really cool. So with that in mind, we're going to take a look at a few Plague Mech mocks today, and we're going to kind of see how these apply to those concepts that we discussed before, as well as just have a little bit of a chat about why they look so cool and little nods and little things like that that can hopefully inspire you to either A, build your own Plague Mechs or just build your own really cool stuff. So let's begin. The first mock that we have today is the very first Plague Mech, which is Mantis by Jafer. So, Jafer, if you want to hear a little bit more of a fun backstory about this, be sure to check out the podcast I did with Jafer, in which it goes into a little bit of the history of Plague Mechs, but this is the very first Plague Mech that we ever saw. So I think there's some really interesting texture play throughout this entire mock. You know, we talked a little bit before about how Plague Mechs kind of have this really cool, unique robot-bug hybrid kind of thing going on. And so kind of playing with the textures, which is something this mock does really well, is a really interesting way of showing that. You know, we see some really smooth areas, which kind of give this bug-like look. And then we kind of see little areas where it's a little bit more mechanical. And, you know, one really good example of this is if you kind of take a look at the torso, sort of all of the dark green elements are very smooth and give that sort of, crunchy, for lack of a better term, exoskeleton bug kind of shell-like design. And that's textures are sort of continued throughout the arms and stuff. And then you get to this mutterfoot that's used here. And areas of this have that texture, but areas of it also sort of have a more sort of mechanical detail to it. And it's contrasted nicely with these smoother areas. And so you get that sort of nice juxtaposition there of the two contrasting textures. But on top of that, you could even argue that some of the smoother dark green areas also look kind of more like, say, armor that you would see on a mech or something. And so I think it's really interesting that Jafer's kind of blurred the line there with some of these textures. I think that's intentional and really effective because you get this, smooth, crunchy, bug-like aesthetic, which also could easily be translated into the mechanical aspect. And, these bugs often, or these Plague Mechs rather, kind of give off this sort of science experiment gone wrong, future vibe to them. And both of those textures very much lean towards that. And so kind of blurring the line between the two of them, I think is really unique and really cool because inherently they are a hybrid of mechanical and bug-like. So not really being able to always tell the difference between which one, I think is actually really fitting and really cool and fits this mock well. Another thing that fits it so well is the choice of weapon. So we, like we said before, it's got the accent color of the trans red here. And so we kind of sort of see that coming here on this weapon. Now this is a weapon that came in an Exoforce set called Thunder Fury, if I'm correct. And it had this cool sort of black and dark red marbled effect on it, which almost looks a bit like blood, which is really cool, but also works well with these trans red highlights throughout the mock here. So it's kind of some nice kind of color consistency there. But also just the kind of general shape of this piece here looks very bug-like. It looks a lot like a praying mantis, hence the plague mech's name being Mantis. And I think that's really, really cool. So it's a very, very nice choice of weapon and a very nice way of playing with colors there too, to kind of keep it consistent with the already existing color scheme. Also too, I really like the eyes on this mock. They look very bug-like, obviously, but they also do look a little bit more mechanical. It kind of reminds me of sort of like night vision goggles or something. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I think it's really cool, and again, kind of blurs the line between the two different, the bug and the mechanical. I think it's really awesome. So nice work, Jafer. Always cool to see the original Plague Mech, and always interesting too to kind of gauge, well, like, if this is where it started, what sort of nods can I take from this? What concepts can I take from this? And then directly apply to my own stuff. So let's take a look at another Plague Mech, which is by Johann Deckisch, and is called Hercules Beetle Plague Mech Omnicron. So one thing I like about this is, obviously as the title suggests, it's inspired by a Hercules beetle, which is a beetle from our world, of course. And the Hercules beetle has this really awesome sort of horn pincer thingamajig that's very sort of signature and key to that specific beetle. And it's clever how Johann has taken that concept and then sort of played with it in a really fun and creative way when turning it into a plague mech. So instead of it being a big horn pincer thing, he's taken the idea of it being a big weapon and turned it more into a big gun, which is a little more fitting to that kind of robotic element that we were talking about before. I think that's really, really clever and really creative. So it's still very bug-like and reminiscent of its original inspiration, but it's taking it down a new avenue, a fun avenue. And we even kind of see that here with the arm designs. They still look sort of kind of pincer-like, but yet they also kind of look like guns and stuff. So it's cool to kind of play around with those concepts. I think this mock is a little different to Jafer's, where, there's kind of a blurred line between the textures and stuff. This is more just kind of flipping bug concepts and turning them a little more mechanical, but still keeping aspects of bug very much key with the design. And I think that's really clever and different from what Jafer's done, but good different. I really, 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 really like that. Also cool too, because of the just kind of how bugs look, using these bare bone Hero Factory bones here on the upper arms and the upper legs here, looks very fitting for that sort of bug texture and aesthetic, and is an effective way of not using too many pieces, but really conveying that overall look and design. I think it's very clever and very well done. Also really like the head design on this mock. It's very bug-like. It's got a bunch of pincers and things coming out of it, and just kind of the overall shape, kind of giving it that sort of firm brow there, using those handlebar pieces and the eyes being on the sides and stuff like that, and combining it too with that sort of sloped grill plate there. It looks very bug-like, and it also looks very mechanical too, so it's a nice blend of those two concepts. It's really nicely done. And one final little thing I really like about this mock is the use of gears. Now, gears, of course, are extremely mechanical, and they're also extremely Bionicle. We've seen gears from G1 and G2 and all throughout Bionicle's history. And so I always think it's something that, surprisingly, I don't see used too much nowadays, unless it's in an actual gear function thing. But just using gears for, textures and aesthetics and stuff like that, it's super Bionicle-y, so why not give it a go and play around with it? Because, as we can see on this mock, it's a really creative way of not only conveying that mechanical detail, but also sort of kind of adding a bit to the gun here. The choice of the gears being on the side there, where it kind of, the gun transitions into the head, even though I don't imagine it actually has any function. I might be wrong here, but it kind of looks like, just the way they're placed, that those gears would move and then the gun itself would tilt up or tilt down or something like that. So you're putting them there kind of implies that sense of motion, or implies the fact that, this is a sort of moving, working, real kind of, for lack of a better term, I guess, play feature in the mock. I think that's really effective. So nicely done, Johann. Let's move on to the next mock, which is by Anthony Wilson and is called Beetle Plague Mech Theta. So before we spoke about how most plague mechs are primarily black with another color and then an additional accent color, mainly used for like the eyes and things like that. So here we see that accent color continue down into the weapons. And of course we saw with Mantis before, there's some of those additional trans-colored accent colors there were sort of used throughout the mock and various other parts of the body here. But it's cool to just see it contained to the weapons. This trans color here really, really pops up against the sort of darker colors that are used throughout the rest of the mock. So it's beautiful to see that really awesome contrast there. I really, really like that. I think it's a really effective use of color as well. And also really cool too to use some of these cool new Nexo pieces on the eyes there. And I'm pretty sure these weapon pieces probably came with Nexo as well. I can't say I'm sure exactly where they came from. I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know exactly what set they came in. I look forward to reading that. but they make very effective weapons and look really cool. They look bug-like, they look mechanical, they look sort of futuristic. It's all very fitting in that Plague Mech vibe and design. It's really, really awesome. Speaking of that kind of Plague Mech design and vibe, he's used some really interesting pieces here. Now, like we said, it kind of has that bug aesthetic, every Plague Mech. And the use of pieces, using these Rakshi heads here, Rakshis look kind of sort of more bug-like to a degree. Using these Hero Factory shells here, which we've seen a little bit before, they do look quite bug-like when used in this manner. And then even some of these funky, cool Knights Kingdom pieces in dark red here that actually came in an Exoforce set. Surprisingly, they also have that really cool, crunchy bug exoskeleton aesthetic to them. It's really, really cool. And then even Sue, we take a look at the back here, and he's used this Vokama Hordika mask here. Now, of course, the Hordika had this whole sort of aesthetic of, corrupted and kind of becoming a little more like they'd been poisoned and stuff, and, they were obviously bitten by Visorak and, injected with Visorak venom, all that jazz, which is, again, kind of more bug-like. So even using pieces like that, their whole concept was sort of revolved around sort of bugs and poison and all that sort of stuff, again, actually is really, really clever because it, continues to look more and more bug-like and continues that aesthetic. And so I think the overall choice of pieces there, whether it's from textures or just taking nods from where those pieces originally came from, it's very creative and very clever and is a brilliant way of being able to convey the look that it's needed to convey. Some other really awesome things I really like on this mock, we take a look at the legs here. These repeated tires throughout there look very, very bug-like and also really cool. Just, simply repeating those different tire pieces there. It's a really effective, nice design. Looks bug-like, also looks quite mechanical. It's really nice. And same thing can be said there too with the torso here, this sort of repeated ribcage design of these handlebars. Ironically, now that's the second time we've seen those handlebar pieces. I guess they work very, very well for this aesthetic. Again, looks very mechanical, looks very bug-like. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but we're just seeing some really effective, clever ways of utilizing the Plague Mech aesthetic, and so I think that's cool in itself. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of looks like an Avmatoran torso has been used for this torso here. That's really, really cool. It's awesome to just see that this is a non-custom torso that he's been able to detail up and greeble with all these mechanical details and pieces on the back and stuff, and it totally tricked me for a second there. I thought it was a fully custom torso. So that's awesome. That's always really cool. You don't have to necessarily go ham bone and come up with, some crazy intricate torso. You could just start with an Anika torso or an Avmatoran torso like this, or any kind of pre-made torso element, and make a really effective, nicely shaped, nicely designed mock. Very nicely done. Fantastic work, Anthony. Let's move on to the next mock, which is by Mittens and is called Tarantula Hawk Plague Mech Sigma. So here we have one of Hector's Plague Mechs. Obviously, this was noted by its gold highlights here. Very, very cool. So one thing I really like about this is the head design. It uses this awesome Ruru piece here. And something that's really interesting and really, really unique, I guess, about a lot of the old original Bionicle masks, whether the Toamata masks or some of the old Turaga masks, or even some of the Matoran masks, all those sort of older masks. Surprisingly, a lot of them had weird, intricate connections that you could put lightsaber rods or various other pieces into. We can see it here with this Ruru. You can shove these horn pieces here into the eyes on the Ruru. But for example, certain aspects of like Liwa Nuva's mask have some interesting connection points on them. A bunch of other masks that I can't even think of or remember now have sort of, lightsaber-sized holes where you can put stuff in. So kind of, think about that. Have a look at that. Are there, break out some of those older masks and just play with them. See if there are individual connection points or things in there that you can put stuff in. Because whether you use it like this on a mock and you kind of use it to create some interesting shaping and add horns and things like that, that's one really cool thing. Or you could do the other option of, making it, just simply using it as a mask on a toe or something, and then, adding a lightsaber rod and extending out like a scope eye or something on it, so you can kind of build off of the mask. So lots of possibilities there. Be sure to play around with them. It's really, really cool. So we see a bunch of these awesome Technic panels in blue used pretty much throughout a lot of the mock. And I think that's really welcome and really cool. Especially too with a lot of Technic sets nowadays, a lot of them then come with a lot of different Technic panel pieces, whether they're small or large. And on top of that too, some of the more recent Technic sets come in like Azure and a lot of fun, interesting colors. So yeah, maybe it's worth buying some Technic sets and seeing what those pieces and parts can do for your collection. Or in this case here, we can see them being used very, very effectively to create some awesome bug textures. Something else I really like too, again using some Technic pieces, we've got this flex tube piece here used on the waist. Now this is a bit of a thicker flex tube piece, which is a lot more sort of flimsy compared to your regular flex tube, and this is used for the pneumonic tubing and things like that in some Technic sets. And yeah, that's really cool. It looks mechanical, looks bug-like, and it's just a really interesting detail. I think it looks fantastic. Speaking of looking fantastic, it's something I've not really touched upon just yet, but all of these Plague Mechs have had this really awesome kind of digigrade leg design, which is, not quite humanoid, not quite bug-like, but also kind of a bit bug-like and just sort of unusual and really cool. And I think that's definitely something to note and definitely something to think about if you're making your own Plague Mech or sort of bug-inspired mock. Also, one of my favorite parts of this mock is taking a look at the back. It's awesome sort of jet-propelled wing thingamajigs here. Very, very, very cool to see. Very simple, just using a bunch of sort of tire pieces and gears and things like that. And then adding some trans pieces at the back. And yeah, he's got these awesome sort of jet booster things here. From the front, it just sort of looks more like, like bug wings or something. But from the back, it's a bit more mechanical and really clever. So a great way to kind of take that concept. Also, too, while we're at the back here, really cool to see that he's got this sort of stinger at the back here. Very bug-like, very creative, and very clever. So overall, we've seen 4 fantastic, well-designed Plague Mechs. Something to think about. We've noted a lot of really interesting things on all of them. So if you're planning on building your own Plague Mech, there's a lot of inspiration to take from there. Or heck, maybe you just want to, grab an animal, a bug, or anything in the animal kingdom in our world and try and take some of those concepts and put it into a mock of some kind. Who knows? See what you can come up with. I mean, we've directly seen some really interesting things like taking the concepts of sort of larger horns on a Beetle and trying and turning that into a big gun on a mock or something like that. So heck, you might even take something like the pointy tip of a swordfish on a swordfish, and seeing if you can kind of incorporate that into some cool Rahi or Toa or something that you're building. I don't know. See, the possibilities are endless. Study the animal kingdom, see what you learn, take notes from that, and adapt it to what you're making. Who knows what you might come up with. Anyway, that's about it for now, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to check the links in the description for my social media, and also there will be a link there to the brand new email address. So if you want to submit some of your mocks to the show, you of course can, but you can only do so through the email from now on. If you're a little confused about that, I have also posted a video that talks a little bit about how to submit mocks now. So be sure to check that out if you haven't, just so you're up to date on what to do there. That's all for today, guys. Happy building. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.